As entrepreneurs, we all have a reason why we chose to leave our 9 to 5 for an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm here to capture those stories of why we all hustle and grind for our companies. Evan is an accomplished business marketing strategist, recognized Amazon best-selling author in goal planning and success, and a seasoned entrepreneur with a diverse portfolio in industries including real estate, finance, and wellness. His expertise extends to the establishment of a robust real estate portfolio expanding across 7 cities in Ontario, underscoring his prowess as an acquisition expert and a proficient implementer of strategic systems. Evan's commitment to establishing and nurturing lasting connections remains foundational to his approach, ensuring mutual success and prosperity. Evan, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm really honored to have you here. This sounds like it's going to be a fun episode, man.
Yeah, likewise. I think we're going to have some good times here.
Absolutely. So first thing I want to ask, just for a little context, let's kind of bridge into the stories and everything. But what I want to hear first is, what do you do? What's your ninja skill?
My ninja skill. My ninja skill is my energy. That I would say like my energy is contagious. And so I take that into all my businesses with me. I'm quite the serial entrepreneur, but my niche right now and my passion is real estate. But my ninja skill would be my energy for sure.
Mm-hmm. And you're in an interesting part of real estate because you're in Canada.
Yeah.
And for a lot of us in the States, we don't understand the Canadian real estate market because it is a completely different bear than
Yeah.
what we're
It's
used
very
to.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are the differences you've seen between real estate in the States and real estate in Canada?
Okay, so I'm a real estate investor.
Mhm.
I'm not a realtor. So the answers I'm going to give you are very focused on like the investment side of things.
Uh-huh.
I would say the first thing is like I'm in Ontario and the landlord-tenant laws are very hard here. But Canada as a whole, the lending is very, very difficult. Like in here, we're fighting and recruiting lenders to see who will even accept the lend for the properties we want. And I know in the States, you put a bid out and you got like 10 lenders who are like, yeah, we'll lend on this, we'll lend on this, right? As long as the numbers work. Here, there's a whole process and a million guarantees. You can't even get away from a personal guarantee until you have like $100 million in holdings or something. It's hefty. But the other difference too is like the main cities are not cash flow cities. They're really like appreciation focused. They're equity building cities. And so, like a perfect buy and hold or a Burr, for example, you're not cash flowing anywhere near the amount you'd cash flow over there. You can find it here, but they're going to be more tertiary markets to do it.
Yeah, but and when we say not cash flowing, at least from the experience I've had in the Canadian markets, and it's not anywhere near as much as you, but just from what I've heard, we're talking like $200 a month on a fourplex. I mean, it's the margins are really absurd.
Yeah, it's definitely possible to see like very low, a couple $100 on a small multi for sure. Um, like the majority of the condos people buy here, they lose money on. Single family homes, very hard to earn money on unless you're putting like, 40-50% down. And so yeah, it's a bit of a different ball game for sure.
Yeah, and we had I had an investor we came across years ago, and we were doing some coaching with her, and she was saying, yeah, she had an old family house, was all paid off. No, sorry, no, she had refinanced it and had a mortgage on it, and had put like a pretty significant amount down. She's like, I'm breaking even. And it just blew our minds that
Yeah.
between property taxes, which are incredibly high, plus the mortgages, plus all of these other things, it's really difficult. It's a
Yeah.
difficult market. And we were talking in the green room earlier about Toronto. I don't know if you want to go into the stories about Toronto.
Toronto's just it's such a low cap rate. Like, it's such a low cap rate, and the value of the homes in Toronto are so high. And to even make it make sense to own something there, you got to be buying multis for sure. You can't be picking up like singles. It doesn't work in Toronto.
Yeah. And I'm hearing tenants put down 5, 6, 7 months of security deposit to incentivize a landlord to give them up to give them an apartment because it's such an incredibly competitive market. I mean, it's just really, it's weird. And a lot of people don't realize 1/3 of the population of Canada lives in Toronto or the greater Toronto area. And I think that's part of it is it's a city larger than New York City. And so people don't really realize that, and it just totally changes the game, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very competitive. It's like you have your A+ neighborhoods, and anybody who wants to get in those neighborhoods, they want to be close to the downtown core. They want to live in nice areas. They're competing to have the nice properties to rent. So yeah, we just actually had someone recently in a tertiary market put down a year's rent up front. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't even ask for it. That was the crazy part. They're like, hey, we'll give you this, just, like, check my stuff, make sure we're good, we're qualified, but like, we want this unit, we'll give you a year up front. How am I supposed to say no to that?
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. And so I think I wanted to give some context to the people here in the States who are not used to the Canadian market, kind of
Yeah,
what you guys go through, because you guys again have your whole nother world worth of you have a lot of other variables involved in the market. But
for sure.
now I always love to hear the story behind the where you come. How did you get into real estate? What was that story behind going into real estate,
Yeah,
especially in Canada? Yeah.
great question, great question. So first of all, I live here, so like this is kind of, where we started in our own backyard. We have intention to get into the US market for sure, and I'm sure we will over the course of the next year or so. But um my business partner and I were doing consulting. We had huge networks, each of us, and we were, a lot of people came to us, say, oh, where can I find this, where can I find that? So we were connecting people with money to people who needed it, basically, for lending, for venture capital, whatever it may have been. And a gentleman approached us one time, and he's like, "Hey, listen, I'm in real estate. I'm doing ABCD, and I need a second mortgage. Like, can you guys connect me with someone who will give me a second mortgage?" We're like, "Well, like, let me see what you're up to." So, um, he showed us, and we're like, "You know what? We'll lend you this mortgage, and see how it goes." And so we lent him the mortgage ourselves, and then we were like, how the heck is this guy making money when we're lending to him at this rate? Like, it doesn't make sense. So we're like, hey, we'll lend to you more. Teach us, like, show us what you're doing. And so, the rest is kind of history. He showed us what he was doing. We did a few properties with him. We kind of sat back and said, like, I think we can do this on our own, and really systematize it. We love systems. We love, like, organization and business admin. So, we just took it and ran with it. And we've been doing it for 7, 8 years now.
Hmm. And that's so basically you're just connecting, you're I don't want to say brokering these deals,
Yeah, I
or how does
guess,
that
like,
work? Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
we were kind of brokering deals. I don't want to use the word brokering, but we were
Hmm.
consulting. Yeah, yeah, a little bit of
Got
a
it.
gray space there, but we were consulting, just connecting the dots, and then
Yeah.
now we're the ones in it, doing it, building this real estate portfolio. We're in many different cities across Ontario, so.
Now, specifically, this is also another thing in Canada that doesn't really happen here in the States, where with IRAs and retirement accounts, we often can't, unless it's specifically a self-directed account, we really can't do too much with it. But you guys, the TFSAs you guys have are completely different, and I think
Yeah.
does that make it easier to access money? Meaning anyone can use just about any of their retirement accounts. The TFSA is basically the equivalent of a US IRA. Um, do you find that as something that, like, an everyday Joe can go and lend on real estate, whereas in the States it's much harder? Or how does that affect you guys, if at all?
Yeah, so it's way less common, which is like the craziest part about that, because like, that's the easier part in Canada compared to the States, but
Yeah,
it's just not common. It's
yeah,
not like made mainstream where like everybody saves up so that they can, like, lend in real estate. They're really like, the majority of people that even have these savings accounts are like the old school. They got the money manager who's like investing in, like, really, like, conservative stocks for them, and there you go. But we have noticed that as we talk about, like, what we've been achieving and what the people who have worked with us have achieved, people are looking at us like, oh, I want to do that. I'll like use my RRSP, and I'll use my TFSA, and we'll do registered funds with you guys as well. And so yeah, it's been really good. It's been interesting. It's been growing for sure.
because that's one of the things, and this absolutely blew my mind when I first learned about it. When I was learning about TFSAs and RRSPs and things like that, is you can mortgage your house using your retirement funds through another bank. And it's just, I'm really surprised. So basically, you have to go through the qualification process, and there has to be another bank involved. You can't directly lend it to yourself. But I'm surprised more people aren't taking advantage of that. Do you know why they aren't? Or is it just sort of
You
people don't
can't lend to
know?
yourself. You can't lend to yourself,
I
and
think,
it has it has to be arm's length in order to use
Yeah,
registered funds.
I
So
thought
yeah,
so.
if you, I mean, there's ways to do it, but it's not,
Okay.
you should be lending to other people, not yourself.
Yeah, and that's something in the States that we always teach is never lend to yourself. But for some reason, I thought I heard something about that. I might be wrong. It might be just with RRSPs or something, but I don't
Yeah.
know. Uh, I'll have to double check that info, just 100% sure. I
Yeah.
thankfully don't ever give that info. I just something I heard. Thank you for
Yeah.
fact checking me. I appreciate that.
No problem. No problem.
But so you got into real estate. So you're getting into you're actually now actively investing in real estate. How many doors? What does that look like for you right now?
Yeah, we're scaling aggressively. Like we have vision within the next couple years to, break a couple thousand doors.
Nice.
We're on our way. We're getting into larger developments and larger buildings now. We're building a ground up development here. 131 units. We might be able to squeeze out a few more in there. So, nice little apartment building. So we're focusing more on those smaller apartment buildings like that. And that's helping us scale really well. And we love our infill. We still love our like single family to duplex conversions and triplex conversions. That's really where we started and what we thrive in. So we're doing it all.
Interesting. All right. So, you also said, I'm going to pivot here for a second because there's
Yeah.
another thing in your bio that I kind of am interested too. So you got the real estate side of things and finance and then wellness. Like,
Yeah.
how do those correlate to each other? And what do you do as far as the wellness side of things is concerned?
I don't do too much wellness anymore,
Mhm.
but I was managing high-end health clubs for quite
Okay.
some time in my earlier years, and
Mm.
just like fell in love with the like training side of things and got into amazing shape and loved managing. It was like sales is really what I was like managing for these health clubs, but that kind of like found my niche, and then from there the wellness that I'm still in today, we own a an online clinic basically that is not a gym industry but related, but doctors. So we help connect paramedical clinics with doctors online so that patients can get their prescriptions like way faster. And something that may not happen in the States is like in Ontario, at least in the GTA, Greater Toronto area, it's like impossible to find a family doctor. And then the wait time, if you have one, could be quite some time, and then you got to drive and get there and all this stuff. So, you go to like a chiro or a physio, you have an accident or something, and they're like, yeah, you need a knee brace. Well, the knee brace is like $700. We want to, put it through insurance. So they got to go get a prescription for that. And the physios and chiros can't write that script. So they have to go to their doctor. So we implement a system where the paramedical clinic, like the physio and chiro, actually have our system integrated into theirs, and they can just connect their patient with the doctor and get that script virtually right there.
And that is a huge benefit because um and these are pre-COVID numbers, and I'm sure they're much worse right now. I live right on the border of Canada, so we see a lot of people come down here for
Oh yeah.
MRIs because to book an MRI in Ontario is 2 years.
It's
And I think a lot of people don't
crazy.
realize that 2 to 3
Yeah.
years to book an MRI. Yeah.
It's really wild. Like you start to understand why privatized healthcare is like does so well, right? Everyone's like, oh no, we want this like, government funded healthcare. It's like, well, like this is what you end up with, these huge wait times, right? So
Yeah.
and then you think of the patient who's going through and suffering for X amount of time, even for something as small as like an orthotic or a knee brace, right? They could go a month after a car accident or something where they've hurt themselves. And so this way they connect right away, they get the prescription in, and not only that, the patient's, solving this problem way faster, but the paramedical clinic's revenue increases so much more because they can service way faster and put out products way more effectively.
Exactly. And I think you're doing something that entrepreneurs are incredibly good at. It's you saw a major issue, a major problem, and then came up with a solution for it.
Yeah.
And I think, that's the fundamental thing of entrepreneurship, right? Is being able to solve a problem, especially one in medical
Yeah.
where, these people are in pain. They can't get the reason why these wait times are so long is there's not the staff, there's not the resources to be able to fulfill at all, or anytime in the near future. And coming
There's
up with
yeah,
that is awesome. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
That's really amazing. Now, was there any story behind like how you came up with this beyond just seeing a problem and moving on? Was there this something that, you had a car accident and had issues with it? It took a
No,
year to get this, and
I wish it was like some epic story, but it really isn't. I didn't even personally come up with the idea. It was I'm a co-founder in the business, but it was my business partner who had come up with it, and he owns a couple clinics, and he was just like, it's impossible to get patients to get back and get this treatment done effectively. Like their conditions change, they're getting worse, and it takes forever, and then maybe they do get the prescription and they don't come and fill it, or they don't because they're so tired of it or whatever. So this bridged that gap, and yeah, we've been building it out since.
awesome. I think it's a valiant effort, and it's something that's really necessary, especially in somewhere like Canada where
Yeah,
healthcare is such an issue.
yeah,
It's good healthcare. It just takes a long time to get it.
that's
So
exactly right.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And especially since the Canada has this hybridized public/private healthcare system as well, where it's a different system than what we're used to in the States. So
Very
yeah.
different.
So let's go at your book called Goal Planning and Success. What we hear a lot about goal planning. We hear a lot about these are the things we get to do in success, and it's a relatively broad topic, right?
Yeah.
What specifically does your book hit in as far as goal setting and success? What specifically does your book have that sets it apart from others?
Yeah, good question. I would say it's really simple. I wrote this book when I was super young, so it's not a sophisticated book. But I worked and was mentored by Bob Proctor, and he's the law of attraction, the secret. And so I just learned so much from him and started achieving a lot of success when I was younger. And all my friends and people and peers were like, "How are you doing this? You did this, and then you went and did this." And then I was like, "All right, I'm gonna write this down." Like I want to even figure out like what are these steps, right? And so I kind of just wrote down the steps I'm taking each time I have a goal in mind, and it turned into this idea of a book, and I wrote the book, and off we went. So it's called Make the Decision. It really is about making specific decisions in order to hit your goals and get the success you want. Because it's really easy to read the book that talks about it, but this book gives you the question to ask yourself and then tells you to make that decision. So a bit of each chapter has a little bit of a work to do at the end of it to help you brainstorm.
Which I think is wonderful because oftentimes as entrepreneurs, especially if we're getting started, I don't know about your story, but my story is I grew up when I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, it made a lot of things totally made sense to me because I
Nice.
had the poor dad family. My mom was an engineer, or my dad was an engineer. Mom was a psychologist. Professional, definitely middle class family, but they had no idea what to do with their entrepreneurial son. I scared the hell out of them. I had no idea what questions to ask to get these things out of my head because I knew it was like listening to an orchestra that was playing out of tune and everyone else was like, oh yeah, no, it's fine. And I'm like, no, it's not. Something's wrong here. And I had no
Yeah,
idea what it was. And so I think that's a really great way to approach it is having those questions going, what questions do you have to ask yourself in order to
yeah.
really guide yourself in the right direction? So, I love that technique. I love that.
How did you break through with your parents? Like how did you take it to a place? Okay, I see your smile. You got to have a good story here somewhere. So you read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and then what? What happened after?
So I went into business for myself, and with my parents' encouragement, God bless them, they tried to encourage, and they really did a good job about getting outside of their comfort zones and say, okay, now I kind of have an idea how to support you. They had to do it from the background just because they understood they didn't have the resources, and I immediately went to mentors.
Okay,
And
great.
so I found some people in my life when I first went into business. I joined a group, again, 20 years in the learning industry. But when I first started on my own about 7 or 8 years ago, I found a group of freelancers who were who did the same thing I did. We're all freelance, all 1099s. And hearing their stories really helped a lot. But then, yeah, with me, it was mentors. Absolutely mentors. The very first mentor I met was a guy named Chris, who's still a good friend. I'm still part of his team at this point. What I did is I went in and said, here's my value I can provide to you. And so I helped him at the time. He had a TV show, Flipping Houses. And I went in and said, you have this academy you're trying to build. I have this expertise because at that point, over a decade's worth of experience in online learning. Let's work together. and it worked out to be, over the years, he's been an amazing mentor. We become good friends too, after, through the process of going through it and building multiple companies with him. But that's really what it was with that mentorship, like you did with Bob Proctor. And I'd like to hear actually the story, because this is one thing I hear a lot of people, especially when they're first starting off, is I need a mentor, and they have no idea how to go about it or how this happens. I want to hear the story about Bob Proctor and him being your mentor, because that's a pretty big name mentor there. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I got, first of all, I gotta say, I completely agree with you on the mentorship side of things. I think, uh, you know, the analogy that I use often, even still, people ask me like, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And like, oh, should I get a mentor? Should I get a coach? I'm like, yeah, like
Mhm.
the best people in the world, even if you look at the best athletes in the world, they still have coaches, they still have trainers. Like you can be the best of the best, but you should still have coaching and mentorship. It's like, you don't know what you don't know. You can't see what you can't see outside of your vision. You are always going to be blinded by your own experience, right?
Mhm.
The more you read, the more that broadens. But the mentorship is just it's priceless, right? And
Yeah.
so
I,
um
I have friends who are literally billionaires who have mentors. I mean,
yeah,
it is such a critical part. I have one I know one guy who calls himself the mentor of mentors. His mentors need mentors too. And I think
wow,
there's that just having life is a team sport, business is a team sport. Having
yep,
that amount of just bringing that experience. Actually, one of my mentors, Greg, says there's counsel and opinion. Opinion is what everyone has. It's something that we kind of think it's going on. We kind of think this is it. Like my parents have an opinion about
yeah.
this, and they, with again good intentions, but it's an opinion. Counsel is what I look for. I've been there. I've screwed these things up. I have learned from it, and here's your fast track, to getting my experience and being able to tap into it. I look for counsel, and mentors is the number one way to get counsel.
100%. We would always say to people like, if the person doesn't have what you want,
Mhm.
it's just an opinion. So you
Mhm.
need to be careful of who you listen to and who you choose to get mentorship from, because a lot of times people entering an industry or entering their own business will listen to whoever wants to tell them something and think that it's mentorship, right? And so
Yeah.
if they don't have the success or the financial wherewithal or the experience that in the place you're looking to be careful. It's an opinion, and then try and pay your bill with an opinion. It doesn't work very well. So
Not at all, not at all. And the whole goal behind mentorships and coaches to some extent, I differentiate. A coach is somebody that's kind of is giving you the experience. A mentorship is a much more personal relationship. All of my mentors are my good friends, and it's part of the relationship. So just to kind of differentiate between the two. But what I'm looking for out of a mentorship is I like you said, I'm always looking for somebody that's much farther along than I am in business and who has done it already. I want to learn how they failed, how they've succeeded, and
yeah.
really see behind the curtain and get that. Basically, I am buying experience from them.
Yeah, you're buying an advantage. You
Yeah.
are driving through the field of landmines of business, and they are the ones who's got the compass or the map, who's saying, okay, pivot right, pivot left, pivot right, right, dodge the landmine. And so I mean, that's what we're here to do. We're here, like the mentors are here to speed up your process, make it more effective, and hit as few landmines as possible.
So I know we all have something, like I told you, counsel versus opinion. And what is one thing that one of your mentors has said to you that's just really resonated with you? Like one piece of wisdom, whatever
I
you randomly think of off the top of
I
your
know
head.
I'm like trying to think like quickly. I always it's usually a quote that comes to mind of like jump out of the plane and build your parachute on the way down. It's like if someone gives you an opportunity, like go, right? Like you gotta take it. Most opportunities that are gonna make the biggest impact, they don't last long. So you gotta jump in and go. And I think entrepreneurs are I mean, we do this every day, right? And so building that parachute on the way down as you've already jumped out of the plane is exactly what you have to do. And so I've really taken that into heart, and we are very analytical, and we know what we're doing so well now that we can afford to build the parachute on the way down, because we already have like the framework and the blueprints of the parachute in our head. So now when opportunities come, we can react really quickly. It's definitely not a quote of like do something completely blind that you have no idea about and lose all your money, right? There's some education and some expertise behind that, but once you have that, then you need to move quick.
Exactly. And I think as entrepreneurs, our risk tolerance is much higher than most people's are because of that. A whole
Yeah,
lot more
especially
fun.
real estate investors. Like we got, I talk to people, they're like, "Oh man, I have this bit of debt here." I'm like, "Oh man,
Oh,
like let me tell you about debt." Like, we're scaling a real
heroes.
estate empire. We're stretching debt. Uh,
Exactly. And it's things like that. Hey, I flipped one house and that's how I got my haircut.
I love that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm with you on that one. I'm with you.
That's a fun ride. It's it's different.
It's stressful. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, yeah. And but I think it's something that as entrepreneurs, it makes us a lot stronger because
Oh,
we have to manage decisions that could potentially lose us very large amounts of money. And sometimes you just have to go strictly on um, faith. And
yeah,
not from a religious context, just faith that it's going to turn out right no matter what
yeah.
happens. Even if there's something goes wrong, I have the ability to make that work. I have the ability to make things go right versus just kind of waiting and hoping that something goes right or hoping I don't get laid off in a job. And I think it's a different world. It's a different life balance.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know about you, but for me, it's a whole lot more fun than the alternative.
Oh man, for sure. Like you can work forever just to get laid off and lose everything anyways. Might as well work this way and have the bigger upside, right? So I totally agree with you there. And yeah, belief is so important and I think it's an underrated aspect of entrepreneurship. Um and even if you don't believe in yourself fully, because sometimes it's hard as an entrepreneur, it's not this like sunshine and rainbows of like if you believe in yourself all the time you're going to do great. Like sometimes you go to bed and you're like holy shit, like what is happening, right? But part of it is really having that like relentless faith in yourself, and part of it is also surrounding yourself with people who believe in you too, so that when those times come where you're wavering in your belief, you have those people who are telling you, no man, you can do this, you got this, and here's what you're good at, focus, get back on the horse, let's go. So entrepreneurship is this crazy entangled line, of like it's like a ball of yarn after it's been like mixed up on the floor. But it's incredible, it's rewarding, you build insane resilience, like you're not afraid of rejection, you have your fears of all these perceptions almost go away, like you almost stop caring what people really think. You have this vision of like getting it done, making sure you do it in a way that's going to positively impact people, hopefully, and then everything else kind of goes to the wayside. So yeah, I've heard no way more times than I've heard yes, and I'm still very successful. So yeah.
And it's freedom. I think it's true freedom. It's definitely not the easy route. It's very much the hard route. But it is. I feel so much more free now that I'm an entrepreneur because I know that no matter what's going to happen, except for like large nuclear bombs falling or meteors and things like that, we don't have any control over any of that,
Yeah.
so we're good. But
Yeah.
except for
Yeah.
like true cataclysms, we can handle. We know how to pivot. We know how to handle it. It might suck for a little bit, but we I'm gonna make it go right. And I think
Yeah.
that's a huge amount of freedom just in that alone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think like even I completely agree. And then there's some things out of your control, like COVID was wild. COVID was like
Yep.
it wasn't a comet hitting the Earth, and it wasn't a nuclear bomb, but it felt like both at the same time. Like it was. I don't know how it went where you are in the States, but like the government here went crazy and like
Oh yeah.
shut everything down. It controlled tried to control everything everyone was doing. And I mean, real estate pumped like I've never seen in my lifetime here. Like the prices skyrocketed so high. Like
Huh.
it was in that's got to be the hottest market we've ever had, was in the middle of COVID because interest rates dropped so low. It was like it was free money. And everyone was getting approved for everything. It felt like, although it's not the truth, but like the stress test was very low for getting your approvals. And so the market just shot up, and then they started raising interest rates and everything has gone down like 20 to 30%.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
been
I mean that was a wild time,
yeah.
and everything, just it really. I think COVID, just like 2008. I know I remember hearing a story about, somebody I know who had a business with Richard Branson and lost a $70 million company within a year
No
right after
way.
2008.
Wow.
And kind of some of the stories behind that. And sometimes even in a situation like that, where you've had that big of a hit, he rebounded and, did very well, and it did not take very long to do it. It was just still, there's that resilience, like you say, that
Yeah,
level of resilience. Yeah.
for
Yeah, and I
sure.
think as entrepreneurs, it's something that makes us significantly stronger. And to a lot of people don't really understand, especially if you're not an entrepreneur, a lot of people don't, they misinterpret what it is. They think it's arrogance, they think it's ego. It's not. It's a resiliency and a toughness, just because, oftentimes entrepreneurship is just being kicked in the gut multiple times
Yeah,
repeatedly.
yeah,
Here's the
100%. That's what it
planet
is.
COVID.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Oh, you think you're on the right track? Let me introduce this to you instead. Yeah,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure. I agree. I totally, totally agree with that.
And especially in Canada, because the government just went really nuts, like way beyond anything here in the States, and
Yeah.
it was bad for a while. So it was something that was, major, and caused a lot of major pivots. So yeah, it was interesting to hear about the real estate market going up during it, but I guess interest rates close to zero, that would do it. But I don't
Rates were
think it would
low.
be
Like
that much.
people were getting like 1.8% interest rates. Like it was. I mean, in my eyes, that's like free money. Yeah, the prices skyrocketed. You could buy something, hold it for 3 months and sell it. And even after your fees, like you were making money. Like the prices were going up that fast. And I mean, it was incredible. You look at some of the, people are still losing their shirts today. Like the assignment market in this area is a bloodbath. Yeah, like buying pre-construction and then assigning that used to be a really, really lucrative business model or in real estate investing model. So a lot of pre-construction was happening here. The population is growing really quickly. We're bringing in a lot of immigrants. And so builders were building like crazy. People would wait in lines, like you'd sleep in line like for 2 days in front of the builder's office to get first dibs at properties. I'm dead serious. Like, and like it became a standard. People were sleeping in lines for a day at least. Like that was like a standard. And like a couple days, 3 days was like bridging there. And so then you'd get this property, you'd wait 2 3 years till it was close to being built, and you would sell it. And you're making 150 $250,000. You never had to do anything, you just put a deposit down to the builder. So like really turnkey, set it and forget it. And then COVID happened, people were buying like crazy pre-constructions in that market, and the builders were running with the market. So as the prices came up, the builders were selling at those newer, higher prices, anticipating that in 3 or 5 years, the prices would then be again higher. And then after, like when the interest rates started coming back up to, fight inflation here, people are walking from life savings. Cause I mean, they were speculative plays and they didn't have this money, but they see the real estate market, they think dollar signs. I was chatting with a woman in Vaughan the other day, and she bought a pre-construction. It was like I don't know, probably just over $2 million pre-construction she bought. Like it's a pretty sizable house. And she's walking from $350,000, like because she can't afford to close. The bank says it's not, like, let's say she bought it for two. The bank says it's worth 1.5. They're going to give her 80% loan to value on 1.5. She doesn't have all this money, and now the property's worth less than what she bought it for. She's better off walking from the property. You know what I mean?
And taking a
So
loss on it.
it's
Yeah. And
crazy.
this in a market where I think your average prices are around 1 million, if I'm right, isn't that?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Average
800 to a million
especially.
average, no matter where you're at. That's just kind of what the market is. So yeah, just to put some context to it, this is more like Southern California, but much larger area. Yeah, yeah,
And the same landlord tenant laws, like very close to the same landlord tenant laws as California as well. So
yeah, they're really strict. And so yeah, yeah. It's
yeah.
it's an interesting market, but we're wrapping up a little bit. I want to get to one question that I ask everyone, and that is, what is one book or podcast that has had a really effect or big effect on your life?
Yeah, I would say the first book I was told to read by Bob would have been Think and Grow Rich.
Mhm.
And like it was one of the driest reads I've ever had, especially in my younger years when I first read it. But man, did it threw me around. So, I ended up reading it a few more times just after that. But that book on just how to actually think properly about wealth and health and success, that changed my entire paradigm. So that's
Well, that's where the term mastermind came from. And terribly quote it, but just this is the gist of it: is that if you grid a group of people together towards a singular purpose, you create a mastermind, and that comes from Think and Grow Rich. And
100%.
so, yeah, and it's very true.
Carnegie and Steele. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the top books as well. Is Think and Grow Rich. Just such an amazing book, even though it was written almost over 100 years ago,
Isn't
and
that
still it's really
wild?
relevant. Yeah, because he went around
Wow.
to every single, like, all of the big, like, Carnegie and all of these huge names in industry at the time, and said, "What do you do? What
Yeah.
are you doing to make money? Why are you successful?" And learn from all of these incredibly successful people, and then put that all into a book. So I get, yeah, it's definitely a bit of a harder read. The audiobook is a little bit
Sure.
easier, but there's so much gold in there. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah, every time you read that book, or at least for me, every time I read that book, like I'm finding new stuff out of it. I don't know how many times I've read it and how long ago my first time reading it was, but it's like you really read it with the space you're in currently. And so there's so much to digest in there. Every time you read it, you pull something new out of it.
Absolutely. I definitely do. I've been through it about 3 times right now and absolutely get something new every time.
Love that.
Uh, Ethan, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate having you here.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks again for joining us on the Hustle and Grind podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Evan, check out the link in the description.